Coming to you from the heart of the Diocese of Savannah, this is It's Catholic, Y'all, a series of conversations about faith and life. Views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily represent the views of the Diocese of Savannah.
Welcome to It's Catholic, Y'all. I'm Bradley Vickers, and joining us today is Birney Bull, a Savannah-based adoption attorney. Birney was born and raised in Atlanta. He earned his law degree from the University of Georgia in 1983, shortly after converting to Catholicism, and has been an active lawyer ever since. He was president of the board of Savannah Care Center, a non-denominational Christian crisis pregnancy center, from 1994 through 2009. He is married and has two daughters, the younger having Down syndrome. Birney, thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Let's start out. For those who are unfamiliar with you and your work, would you just share a bit about your background and how you got into law?
Well, I got into law because I felt like I was qualified to do it. So it seemed like a gift that God had given me, and that was maybe the best way to use it. I was attracted to it with the idea of kind of, I don't want to say I intended to be a judge, but I thought of the wisdom and the judiciousness that a judge should have was something that I aspired to. Well, I'm not a judge. I graduated from law school when I was 23, and as I said, when well into my 30s, who wants a lawyer who's 23 years old, man? What kind of wisdom you get there? So, I fixed that problem. But I was attracted to it for the idea of ordering things around me. And I felt like that was an important thing. I felt like I had the mental ability to, learn the legal analysis and thinking like a lawyer, as they like to call it, that sort of thing.
All right. Law degree from Georgia. Go Dogs. Sick 'em Wolf.
Yeah, there we go.
So how did your interest in adoption begin? Was it personally or professionally or a combination?
Well, as you mentioned, I was president of the board of Savannah Care Center, Crisis Pregnancy Center, for many years. And when our daughter with Down syndrome was born, as is often the case with Down syndrome, she had serious heart problems. The medical impact was going to be significant on the family. And the 9-to-5 stuff that I worked for one of the judges, the 9-to-5 just wasn't going to work. My wife actually suggested that role initially. Well, at Savannah Care Center, we had always been a little bit arm's length in our attitude about adoption. Reason being, we didn't want the word on the street among pregnant girls who might possibly come for our services at Savannah Care Center. We didn't want the word on the street to be, oh man, don't go there. They'll make you put your kid up for adoption. So, I sort of had this about adoption, but then I got to thinking, well, let's see, in over 10 years, I think I've learned the first names of 2 or 3 of the clients. No last names, and now having done adoption only since 2003 forward, I can't name a single person who's come to me from Savannah Care Center. Maybe it's happened. Probably it has happened, but I don't know. So, it seemed to be a feasibility, and then I did step down because I didn't want Savannah Care Center to be the Birney Bull ministry. So, here's someone else turnover. Let's just make this thing an institution unto itself.
Now, I was looking at your website, and on your website, there's a statement that reads, adoption is about finding families for children, not about finding children for families. Can we touch on that distinction, maybe explain about that?
Yeah. Adoption didn't used to exist, really, in the United States. And it came to be seen as a solution to infertility, because it used to be taboo to be infertile. Couples didn't want anyone to know, often didn't want anyone to know that they were infertile. let's don't, so it's all shrouded in secrecy and so forth. But it was, it's been rebranded. And so that mantra, that motto, that statement of principle harks back a little bit to the days when adoption was seen as a remedy to infertility. In other words, we want to be a family, find us some children. Well, it's not Baby Mart, the idea is to provide parenting for children who need it, not to provide parents with children who want them. That's a quote from a woman who is a psychiatrist. She's in New England. Her name is Joyce Pavo, and she is a psychiatrist who specializes in the emotional entanglements that often attend adoption. And it's a statement that's from a book of hers called The Family of Adoption that was influential to me. So I chose that to head the page you're talking about.
And you mentioned the emotional entanglements. And so I noticed also when I was looking through your website that you
talk too much.
You have yeah, it says it right there.
He writes too much.
But you talk about a recipe that involves like 3 categories for successful adoption, and one of those is emotional adjustments. Also, among the first, finding a match, legal steps, and emotional adjustments. Could you just kind of walk us through like that process?
Well, the legal match part is when there's an agency involved, that's mainly done by the agency. The agency, finds a child. We want to adopt. They find a child. They find a match. Okay, well, this birth mother wants X, Y, and Z attributes or character traits in the parents, and okay, here's a good fit. That's a match. Or it could be independently made. You see your pastor on the way out of church on Sunday morning, and he says, "Well, how's it going there, Jim?" And Jim says, "Well, I don't know. Susie's got a problem, Well, you'd be surprised how many matches get made through pastors. That's something I tell people. If you can't afford the easily 5 figures that you get into with an adoption agency, sit down with, I used to say Yellow Pages, and people don't even know what the Yellow Pages are anymore. So open Google up and find every pastor within 20 miles of your house, call them up and say, we want to adopt. And when Jim says, I don't know, to the pastor on Sunday morning, Susie's got a problem, he needs to think of you right then. And the match is made. That's a match, And obviously, that's not a legal process. That's you could call it an emotional process, just a human process. It happens really before the legal steps can even take place. You got to have a match. And there's DFACS. Sometimes they say Division of Family and Child Services, and sometimes they say Department of Family and Child Services. But they take children away from neglectful or abusive parents. Well, if you do that out of pocket, you're pretty much talking about zero. But you have to deal with children who've been abused. You have to deal with DFACS, which some people are great at that. Other people are like, just get DFACS out of my life. But there's DFACS, which is nearly free, and for making the match. You would deal with they have a course that you need to go through, like a parenting course, to make sure that you're qualified and eligible in important ways to adopt a child. So that if money really is an issue, that's something to be considered. If you aren't patient enough to deal with DFACS, then you may have to do an independent thing. I mean, if the daughter next door gets unintentionally pregnant, that may solve your problem. But then there's varying gradations of agency adoption. And really now, top tier in terms of expenditure, the cost of the process, the cost of the agency, international adoption has gotten to be about the most expensive type of adoption. It used to be fairly feasible, and they tried to standardize it worldwide with a thing called the Hague Convention. And of course, it seems like there's a Hague Convention about just about everything you can think of. But it's an international treaty. Well, the United States is a signatory to it as of April 1st of 2008. And so the idea being to standardize adoption worldwide, because in particular, there are countries where kids are being stolen from lower class families, or they can't defend themselves, and who knows what the situation is. So we need to crack down on child trafficking like that. But, okay, who's going to object to that? Sounds great, right? Yeah, absolutely so. But you stack up all of the safeguards against evils like that, and gosh, this is going to cost $38,000 now. Yeah, and guess who pays that? Mr. and Mrs. adoptive parent. Yeah, so they don't do it because they can't afford it anymore. So it's all the way from virtually zero at DFACS to you've got to be kidding. International. Okay, so that's the legal steps. The emotional adjustments, for the most part, take place after the adoption is done. And an adoptive child just automatically has issues to think about that a biological child, it never even crosses his mind. An adopted child is like, well, I wonder why I have such and such mannerism or something. It may actually be a biological and genetic reason that they are good at music or good at cooking, whatever it may be, unlike anyone else in the family, and they're just naturally curious about where they came from. And the adoptive parents should be able to cope with the emotional issues that come along with that and not feel threatened by it when the child says, well, tell me about my birth parents, Well, if the adoptive parents can sort of be on the child's team in responding to a question like that, it's a bonding moment for the adoptive parents and the adoptee, instead of a wedge. If they hear something about the birth parents and the spine stiffens and, the kid can, I brought up a touchy subject. I'd better not talk about this anymore. That's a wedge. And wait till the kid's 15, man. That wedge is going to be a boulder, scratching the surface, but that's what's going on there.
So in terms of the legal services that you provide, you're kind of you're on both sides of the fence. You provide legal services for birth mothers or parents who are considering giving up their child for adoption, but also you're offering legal services to parents who are seeking to adopt a child.
Yeah, well, I mainly represent parents adopting. If it's an independent match, independent, people often think in terms of private versus public. Okay, DFACS is public. Okay, we all understand that. But an agency can be private, but if you do an adoption without an agency, that's independent. Now, with an independent adoption, I can do the paperwork that's necessary for the birth parents, the biological parents, to consent to the adoption. I often say that as a practicing lawyer, doing adoption only is kind of a get poor quick scheme. And if there's any scheme that's quicker at getting poor, than representing adoptive parents. It's representing birth parents. You're really not going to be able to charge much that they're able to pay that way. So, and those kinds of scenarios. Here again, Mr. and Mrs. Adoptive Parent. Here's your bill. You wanted to adopt. Here you go. That's often the way it goes.
What are some of the misconceptions about the adoption process?
Well, I mean, I was a little bit tempted to get into that a minute ago. You used the phrase, give up a child for adoption. Well, in the adoption world, that's a no-no. You make an adoption plan for your child. That's parenting the child. That's not giving up the child. It's giving to the child. A relevant observation to a birth mother who's considering making an adoption plan is, well, if you're choosing parents for your child, that's mothering. It may be the best you can do. If you're living in your car, it probably is the best thing you can do. A common misconception about adoption is that the birth parents don't want the child. They almost always do want the child. A story that I've told many times about that has happened a long time ago. I used to play competitive tennis, which included mixed doubles. And one of my opponents one time was a married couple. And after I lost touch with them later on, they divorced. And the wife called my office, cold call. I don't know if she was selling furniture or insurance. I don't know what it was a cold call. It was a total coincidence. And she tells me her name, and I say, I remember playing you in tennis. And she said, oh, yeah, that sounds different. Well, it's interesting. You do adoption. I'm interested in that because I'm adopted. And so I said, well, have you gotten in touch with your birth parents at all, birth mother? Oh, no, I don't think about that much. I mean, I'm here. That's kind of all I need to know. And I said, I'll bet you the woman who gave birth to you hasn't gone a day since you were born without thinking about you and hoping that everything came out for you. She said, gosh, I never thought of it that way. The misconception there is birth parents don't want the kids. Yep. Yes, they want the kids. But if they are living in the car, it could be the most loving thing to make an adoption plan for them. That's painful. I understand that, But if you're doing the most loving thing for the child, you're providing something that you can't otherwise provide. Well, that's loving your child.
Thank you. That was clarifying that for sharing that story. Let's see here. What type of legal matters are involved with adopting a child, and how can someone who hopes to adopt or who may have an interest in foster care begin that process?
You covered a lot of ground there. I mean, it sounds like a short thing. I mean, it was a one sentence question, but what you talked about there could easily be 5 years out
Very
of
complicated.
a couple's life. Yeah. I mean that process. I'm not answering your question. Sorry, I'm going off on tangents. There's nothing more doomed to succeed than asking a lawyer to talk. Didn't I say that already? I said it again. But agency adoption is much more driven today by birth mother choice. And it used to be, okay, sweetie, we'll take care of you. Just, we'll let you know what to do and where to sign, Well, it's much more driven by the choice of the birth mother. And, if she wants Catholic parents or she wants the father to be employed in the aerospace industry for some reason, well, I mean, it could be anything. But the agencies more and more and more are solicitous to follow the wishes of the birth mother, who, after all, is responsible for the most important part of the process, So we want to carry out and execute her wishes as well as we can. And so the process is much more driven. So some birth mothers say, well, they kind of almost really want the adoptive mother or the adoptive parents to be sort of like friend material, and then we'll be buddies. Others say, well, I'm 16 and I've really screwed things up often through my youth and immaturity and experience, and I want some people who are over 35, and everywhere in between.
Custody is probably,
Yeah. Well, as I say, there's kind of a lot to touch on. When a birth mother makes an adoption plan, it's frequently done while she's pregnant. And conventional wisdom in adoption, again, is after the hormonal experience of delivery, she kind of has to start over and make the choice again. Because, once the hormones bounce off the delivery room wall, she's ready to leap tall buildings in a single bound, carrying the child. For a while there, she feels like, well, maybe I can't. We've been over this now. You live in your car, you can't raise a child in a car, Once she signs stuff, let's say the day after the delivery in the hospital, well, she signs it to specific people or to an agency. Well, those people by statute at that point have a duty to provide medical care for the child. Now, they could just reach in their pocket and pull out money, but the way what that means for most people is add the child to their health insurance. So there's a lot of legal stuff involved, but basically what the way it has to work, well, in Georgia anyway, the different states do it different ways. But the way Georgia does it is, first of all, the existing parents, if they're willing, sign their consent to it. Other states call it consent. We call it a surrender. Well, speaking of giving up, it's a surrender. You surrendered your child. Well, anyway, they signed that. Okay, well, that's merely done in anticipation of an adoption happening. It doesn't terminate parental rights by itself. The termination of parental rights either happens in, say, the juvenile court or in the petition for adoption. One of the types of relief sought is termination of any parental rights that still remain, and sometimes they do. And so, unless and until there's going to be an adoption, legally making these people parents, these people are still parents. Even if they've signed the surrender to them, it doesn't, you can't just stand on the street corner and say, I'm no longer a parent, I don't owe any child support or anything. That's not fair to the kid, So the adoption gives life to, so to speak, or gives effect to the termination, so that the transfer of parenthood can occur legally. And then the birth certificate that was issued when the child was born, which has to be, legally speaking, in Georgia, has to be issued showing the biological mother as the mother of the child. That birth certificate has to be amended, and that doesn't mean you get a piece of paper that says amended or adoption or anything like that. It just looks like you were at the hospital that day, But the original birth certificate is amended to show the new legal parents. Sometimes adoption people get annoyed with the idea that the amended birth certificate, the birth certificate as amended after the adoption, is a lie, because it shows the parents as if they were at the hospital. We gave birth to the kid. That's what it looks like. Well, don't get hung up on that. It's a legal document. It's not a medical document. It's not a statement of biology. It's just the current legal status. And, if you go to get a driver's license or a passport or something like that, you better have a birth certificate that speaks the truth legally right now. It doesn't matter what the biology backstory is.
How can Catholics help support adoptive parents or those going through the adoption process, including those who are hoping to but unable to do so?
As with too many things, the answer is it depends. Because what support means for a particular set of parents or people who hope to be parents can vary from couple to couple. I contribute regularly to an adoption agency based in Macon called Covenant Care. And as the name kind of sort of implies, it's religious based, but they do fundraising. They raise funds out of my bank account, I can tell you that. But that's an agency that does that is more likely to charge adopted parents less because at least some of their budget comes from their fundraising. They have annual fundraising banquets. So, there's giving to agencies. There are Catholic adoption agencies. I think Bethany out of Atlanta is a Catholic agency. Covenant Care is based in Macon, but they're statewide. Most of the adoption agencies operate statewide because the economics of it are such that it's just not economically feasible to have the Savannah adoption agency. In order to keep the boats floating, you really got to have a statewide footprint. And I think Covenant Care does international adoptions too. The Hague Convention requires adoption. The Hague Convention requires adoption agencies that handle international adoptions to be Hague accredited. That's a big bureaucratic hoop for them to jump through. And surprise, surprise, that drives the fee to the ultimate adoptive parents up because they have to do all the stuff that they have to do to be Hague approved. You got to have a Hague approved home study before you even make contact in the other country.
Going back to your website, I noticed when I was looking at it, you have a very unique logo. Could you tell us what does it represent?
Okay, well, I say this there on there, don't I? Okay, there's the circle, that's God. There's the angel, see the halo. Then there are the birth parents. Those are the angel's big wings, and the angel's smaller wings are the adopted parents. And there's the little baby in the middle. I got the original idea or concept for the logo from a website of, I think it was a hospital in Australia or maybe New Zealand. And the name of the hospital was Holy Spirit. And it had it was basically a heart, but one side was much bigger. And so, it wasn't obviously an adoption thing. So I kind of made a more symmetrical heart out of it in my mind. My client, Tracy Yardley, is the one who really made the drawing. If you're going to have a good logo, it should take a while.
It is a good logo. You basically, I just like the message that it sends with you have the baby surrounded by the adoptive parent is surrounded by the birth, and the whole thing is encircled by God.
Yeah, it's not a cross. Chesterton would tell us that we have a cross that is unending in all directions, and instead of a circle that's closed in on itself. But it's God.
The Bible talks a lot about God adopting us. How does working in the adoption world affect how you see God, and how does your faith affect your work?
Yeah. For Christians, adoption is a big dang deal, And let's not skip over St. Joseph, Jesus's adopted father. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, it's great to talk about Catherine of Siena or Teresa of Lisieux and stuff like that. But
the greatest adoption of all time.
Joe. Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we're all adopted children. We're born into original sin, which separates us from our Father God. And so when we're baptized into the body of Christ, that's an adoption. That makes us adopted children. And as St. Paul says, if we're willing to suffer, as Christ did, we'll share in the inheritance, So, yes, it grew out of my pro-life commitment. It having been president of Savannah Care Center for, well over a decade, it I don't want to say it was obvious, but it seemed like the next step to combine my legal abilities and faculties with the carrying out of one of the solutions to a problem pregnancy. That's adoption. It's one of the solutions. It's not the only solution by any means, but it is a solution. And there are couples who see it as a solution to their yearning to parent, and biologically they're infertile and can't, or whatever the explanation may be. We have a daughter with Down syndrome. There's at least one agency I know of, Reese's Rainbow, that focuses exclusively, I believe, on adopting children who have Down syndrome from other countries, which is often because they're not really honored in the other country. The culture maybe thinks of them as damaged goods, and so it's viewed as being an improvement in their lot in life for them to come to a culture that welcomes them more. And so, there are couples who want to adopt a child with Down syndrome, and so they can go to Reese's Rainbow and do it that way.
So St. Joseph.
Yeah, Joe, the worker, man. Yeah, the work. I mean, yeah, it's the work. I mean, it's work, and what does he Painter say of about 15 things? I don't know. I can't keep up with all that. But for me, yes, adoption. That's a big dang deal. That's the wallpaper on my laptop screen. Is a painting of St. Joseph with Jesus standing in his lap. So there's a very, very long story that I can't really tell, but in a sense, I cannot not do adoption. And so, is it a ministry? Well, the same way if you ask a nun or a monk, about their vocation, you're asking about the whole person. It's their whole life, and that's what this is for me. It's my whole life. I mean, I don't want to be a bad husband or father. That's not my whole life, but it's deeply rooted. It's deeply rooted, and I just can't not do it. I don't even think of doing it as affecting my view of God. I view it as living out my commitment to God.
I want to thank you again for being here. For our viewers, if you have questions about adoption or would like more information about the legal steps involved with adopting a child, you can visit Birney's website at adoptneed.com or call his office at 912-ADOPT-NEED. Again, Birney, thanks for being with us today. This has been It's Catholic, y'all.
Thanks.
This has been an episode of It's Catholic, y'all. Visit us at diosav.org or on our Diosav social media platforms for more.